Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. That's a sound we haven't had for a while, have we? Well, actually we have, I just haven't filmed while it's raining for some time. When it's heavy it can be a bit distracting, but it's saved me a job. I was going to have to go round and water my bonsai and various other things in the garden. Well, I'm not doing it now. That's saved me a job. Certainly not going out in the rain to do it, that would be silly. Neighbours already think I'm nuts without watering plants in the rain. Duh. Anyway, quite a few videos with problem elements, yeah? So I thought, let's do one that's more on the cheery side for a flipping change. I mean, if you grow a large number of orchids and lots of different types, there's going to be some problems in amongst them. There always will be. It's not a perfect world when growing orchids. The perfect world is where they come from in the wild, which are many and varied places. So yeah, I thought I'd have a look at the things that either weren't doing at all well and now are looking good or getting better, or those that are performing pretty good and in some cases better than expected, shall we say. So it's always nice to have a look on the bright side sometimes. Simple little things. My Dendrobium moniliform, that's always been a struggling plant, and yet this year, you know, cane's twice as big as before and a good root system. This plant's never had a good root system. Well, now it has, and it's deceptive because although it looks like quite a good root system, it's even better than it looks because half of it's round the back. So it's surrounding the mount. So it's now got a lot of support for the plant. There's no sign of any more new growths yet, but I'm really pleased that it's turned out well this year. It did flower, I think it was back last year. I don't think it's bloomed this year, but it now has the potential because it's got some good new canes. What else is going on here? Some of the, I mean, those of you that follow me know that a set of plants endearingly known as those that came out of the big box, and some of those didn't make it. Some of those were DOA, basically. They were sent in a very, very cold snap, and some of them appeared as though they weren't going to grow, as though they were dead. Let's have a look at some of those. I'm not getting them all down, but I'm quite happy to get a couple down. Now this one was in quite a poor way. Basically looking like cold damage. It is a deciduous type dendrobium, but the top part of the plant's gone mad now. It's got lots of new growth. Some of those are actually kikis. They're away from the base of the plant, but they're close enough that the roots can get down in there. And it's grown a lot of roots, so this is now coming on well, from looking as though it wasn't going to make it. Yeah? So, you know, could possibly even get some blooms on that now. And it hasn't got a tag on it. I've still got some plants around here with no tags on, and every time I see one I think, right, I'm going to go and sit down and do the tags, and then I find something else to do normally. This one here was another one that looked as though it really wasn't going to make it, and the only sign of life really on this one, this was basically what I got, yeah, but it did have two tiny little kikis. Now they are growing on now and are now big enough to separate, but I'm not going to separate them as separate plants. I'm going to plant them up at the base of the plant. And the base of the plant's pushed out a new growth, which is now growing some new roots, because the root system on this was there, but probably not very good at hydrating, because they were very old roots. There's no sign of any branching or new growths on those older roots, so they might have even not been alive. But it is producing some new roots now. I mean, one of the new roots has got from where that growth is out to the side of the moss. So there's roots in under there that I can't even see, including some that I can. So there's another one that's coming on, another one without a tag as well. Duh. I must get round to doing this. Yeah, so some of the big box orchids. The one that the reason for the big box in the first place is right up the back here. I can't get that down without removing all the other plants from this rack because it's the one that lives closest to the glass. But I mean, you know, that is extensive new growths. There's 30 odd new growths on that plant. The plant is enormous. I mean, it's from up there down to here. This is the base of the plant where it's also growing kikis that are becoming large enough to remove soon as well. And that's Chrysium, that one. What else? It's difficult to pick on something. My Brassolalia Mackay that I was given, that I've got to do the return plants for soon. It was swapsies really rather than a gift. I mean, that's coming on well. That's pushed on quite a few new growths. And there's a lot of root branching going on that I can see, you know, at the base of the plant. And there were a lot of roots when in the media, so there's probably a lot of that going on underneath as well. So I mean, that one's coming on well. What else did we do? My Hercoglossum was looking very sorry for itself, and if you remember, I took it out in the kitchen and we took it off the mount, and the actual front of the cork bark was breaking down and getting rotten, and it was taking the roots out. So we turned the mount round the other way and planted it on the back. Well, there's now some good root growth on that. Yeah, I mean, it's got plenty of new canes coming on. So, you know, I mean, that's a large plant. I've had that flipping one ages. And some of the long cane dendrobiums, my anosmum there, it's only got one new cane, but what a cane. You know, that should bloom. And I may even get some blooms on some of the older canes. And the other set of long canes up there pushing on well, that's my Dendrobium Nestor. Now that's still got enough left in the growing season for those new growths to actually extend longer than last year's. They might end up the same length as last year's, but they're going to be at least that long. And that blooms virtually over the whole length of the canes come the late winter, early spring. The Cattleyas. This one's losing quite a few of its lower leaves. It's actually got a kiki growing. That's the first Vanda kiki I've ever had. That's pushing on. Lost some bloom spikes on those in the heat, but the plants aren't doing too bad. There's plenty of top growth going on. And the one in the far corner there with all those bright looking leaves at the top, that's the one that got all those pale patches and everything in the middle of the winter, and I thought I was going to lose the whole plant. But it's recovered. It's pushed out a lot of branching roots, and the top growth is now probably as good as it's ever been. You know, so from looking like a plant that was going to die, it's now a plant that's growing on well. I mean, I've only got 3 true Vandas. I have no plans for getting any more because they take up so much space. Now, yes, I could squeeze another one on the end, but 3 of those types for me is enough. That's okay. I've got a few Oncidium Twinkles around. This is the yellow one. That's pushing on new growths like a good one. Some of the older leaves fading. They do that on the old bulbs eventually. And there's another one somewhere lurking. I can't see it at the moment. Oh, no. It's up behind that manky looking thing. It's the one in the corner near the glass. That's the cinnamon one. Loads of new growth on that. Pushing on really well. But plants that aren't doing so well, I can say relatively safely, my mounted Phalaenopsis are not doing so well. But then I don't do very well with Phalaenopsis out here. Something isn't right for them out here. Maybe it's just too humid for them, I don't know. I mean, they're all hybrids, you know, so they're not species that need any special treatment. The only species I've got is the Sedera japonica, which is now Phalaenopsis. And again, I have no plans on getting any more. Those that I've got will either grow on or not, as they choose to. It'll be up to them. I mean, I've got some plants that just always do well, and they tend to get forgotten because of that. You know, the Miltonia Sunset. This is always pushing out spikes and new growths. You know, it's just a strong plant. And you tend to forget to appreciate when you've got a good one of a type. I mean, I've got some dendrobiums that are struggling. mainly because they started off in that way. So they take time to recover and become strong, healthy plants. I mean, this is classed as difficult to grow, Mr. Hairy. I mean, this Dendrobium senile the new growths are pushing on really well this year. I mean, that one at the top was absolutely tiny, and it stayed like that for some time. Well, now it's growing. Another one sticking out the side. Another one there coming up through the middle. Nice good sized one there, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one coming out to the left. This is just growing well. And most people that I've spoken to have tried these and failed. So for some reason they're classed as difficult. I mean, I've lost one. Mind you, I killed that trying to rest it in the winter, and it didn't make it, so that was me rather than the plant. Getting the plant to recover from badly infested fusarium, you know, and getting that to grow clean and push out some bloom spikes and flower. You know, that's a bonus, you know. And it's a pleasure when things like that happen. It's so easy if you discover fusarium. You're most likely to see it in Cattleya types. You know, when you cut an old bulb off and you think, oh no, here we go. Well, it's so easy to just give up and chuck the plants out, thinking they're not worth the struggle. But, you know, I mean, Anna Maria did so much work on dealing with fusarium and explaining it and symptoms and stuff like that, that the information was available to me. So I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And I have recovered quite a few. I've lost some too. Some were so far gone that they were never going to grow, you know. I've got two Cattleyas that are in that way. Let's get show off out the way here, Bicky. Still going strong, that one. Talk about a bonus. That was not an expensive plant. But funny how things differ. These blooms opened before the heat wave. They're just starting to go. These ones down here opened much later while it was hot. And they failed, basically. They're not doing well at all. But these three clusters have just hung on there. They just look good. Anyway, what I was trying to get at is these are two rescue Cattleyas that were infected and lived bare-rooted on the bench for a very long time. Well, one of them's pushing out a new growth, and they now have a few roots. I wouldn't call that an extensive root system, but it is a root system. And you notice on the pseudo-bulb behind that new growth are some scale. Well, when a plant's weak, the bugs will go for it. Now, I want to show this. That's how you can tell when scale are dead. They come off really, really easy. You should almost just be able to touch them and they fall off. It means they're dead. If they're really hanging on there, and you've got to really, really struggle to get them to move, they're alive. So, but yeah, I mean, I've got a new growth on one of those rescue Cattleyas. This plant originally went downhill fast, and I didn't know why at the time. I took the only two viable bits off, and they had no roots, so I just left them on the bench to see what they would do. They had the standing in, you know, tea bag water. They had root hormone type stuff like Super Thrive. I tried everything and not a light. And then suddenly, some signs of growth. And I let that get going a bit, and then potted them up, and they're sort of coming on. But it's going to be very slow progress. But the little growth there behind that new growth was a winter growth from a plant that had very few roots. So I was grateful to get that. I thought, well, at least there's some life in it. Well, now I'm really watching that new growth, because you can see the size the canes should get to. Yeah? And that was nowhere near it. So we'll see what this growth does. But, you know, it's signs of life where there was none. So progress. All of my Phalaenopsis type dendrobiums are growing this year. Well, they've never grown them. Trouble is they're at the back here, but I mean, I've got some good new growths on them now. You know, they're coming on. they've never, you know, even this one down here has got some nice new growths coming. Lovely one up the back there. Multiple new growths, whereas those plants have struggled for ages. You know, so some progress in places. Anything else? I've managed to keep Deesas alive and bloom them. That's a bonus. Strictly speaking, those ought to be outside during the summertime, and maybe next year, if they're still alive and make it through the winter, they may get some time outside. The problem with me taking plants outside is remembering they're there when there's so much to do in here. You know, I mean, they will take some sun, but if they're going to go outside, they will need to be in a shady place most of the time. And to find a place that's suitable for them, I probably won't be able to see them through the window. So I've got to remember they're out there. And they must not dry out. You know, I mean, if they're going to go outside during some of the summer months, they need to stand in water. Well, water evaporates at a fair old rate, you know. So I'd have to really keep my eye on them. Whereas when they're in here, I see them every day. And they don't get forgotten. So some of my Restrepias are really pushing on. I mean, they're growing into bushes now. So they're growing well, whereas some of my Masdevallias are not. My Miltoniopsis, several were, you know, produced new growths right away from the media. The roots were just in the air, no good at all. They've been repotted, which was a bad time to do them, and yet they're now growing. So I'd class that as a success with those flipping things. Some people would say keeping one alive is a success. Zygopetalums. I've killed so many of them that I nearly gave up. And I thought I'm going to give it one more try. And I just got a named hybrid, Louisendorf. And when I got it, it had a very strange pseudo-bulb. Like a double one, big fat bit and then a smaller bit, and I thought that was an abnormal growth. But I've just grown one, exactly the same. Double bulb, great big fat strong bulb, pot full of roots, new growth coming out. Yeah, I think there's another new growth in there somewhere as well. It's probably around the other side. Oh, there's one here, starting. So I mean, I've now got Zygopetalums that are alive. This one up the back here, that's got two new growths. They're pointing the other way at the moment. So, you know, where there was failure, now there's success. That rain's getting hard. My Loddigesiae. The new canes are progressing. I wouldn't say they're progressing at a phenomenal rate, but it's a relatively new plant for me. I know the canes can get a lot bigger than that. And if you have a look at Todd's Loddigesiae, his canes are 3 times this size. But I didn't even expect this to bloom. I thought it was a young plant. But the canes are growing. They are pushing on continuously, and there are many of them. And that got all of its kikis taken off and mounted up separately. They're starting to grow now. So there's you know, another one of those coming on behind. That seems to be doing okay. Oh, and blow me. Out the corner of my eye, that is Dendrobium Noratokonaga crossed with Aberrans. There's 2 spikes on there that have pushed on relatively quickly. Because I did know it was in spike, but I hadn't seen the buds forming, so that'll be out soon. And most of my, come on brain, Latoria type Dendrobiums, I spent nearly 2 years trying to find one. On the grounds that I saw a massive specimen plant of Rachel's, heard how long the blooms last, was very attracted by the blooms. T.D. Moore, Terry, he had some out in bloom, and I thought, I've got to get me some of them, especially as they don't need the winter rest thing. They should be easier to grow. And I had a chat with a couple of people and said, oh, crikey, yeah, you'll grow those. And it took me 2 years to find one. And then loads came along all at once, so I've actually got quite a few now. And they seem to be doing okay. So the people who said I ought to be able to grow them were right. Yeah. Most of my Cattleyas are doing okay. This is the one that looks the worst, and unfortunately this one did have a touch of Fusarium when I got it, and the guy who sold it to me at Wessex Orchid Society got told, in no uncertain terms, not in an angry way, on the grounds that the chances are he didn't know. And this could have been a division off a bigger plant that possibly was even more infected. Anyway, some of the older leaves on this are atrocious, but they can stay there for now. It's not wet in any shape or form, it's dry, and it's not spreading. Those two leaves have looked like that not far off since I got it. The newer leaves are coming out okay. They're looking good. Yeah. So a recovered plant. In fact, I've got a feeling that sheath up, that sheath up there has got a nice big fat bulge at the bottom of it, so we should get some blooms on that soon. And before it's even bloomed, it's pushing up a new growth. So that's getting stronger all the time, that plant, because last time the new growth matured and bloomed. That would have been this one, I think. No, that would have been this one. Or that one of those two. And then it pushed up this new growth, which, has matured and should bloom, and already another new growth coming. So, yeah, most of my cattleyas seem to be doing okay. I got one up in there that is still yet to bloom, and yet it's a giant of a plant. The trouble is, it's in behind the fogger. It's basically the leaves that I'm touching. This is the latest new growth on it. It's pushing up really, really well. Now that's a Laelia purpurata named variety, and it's never bloomed for me. It's got two massive new growths on it, but then it did that last year. It put up two massive new growths and they didn't bloom. And now it's doing it again. Each lead, new growth, pushing up, loads of new roots, but it still hasn't bloomed. But the plant is growing incredibly well. So you have to be, sometimes getting a really good strong plant is what's needed to get the blooms, if you see what I mean. And other times it could be an environmental factor that's just not right. Now if I can be bothered, I might go and look that one up, because I'd like those two latest growths to bloom. That would be nice. Now it could be that's a cool grower and it's being kept too warm. It could be that it's a warm grower and it's not warm enough, although I don't think it would have suffered from that this year, not with the heat wave. If it is a warm grower, it's been in ideal conditions for 3 months, so maybe it will bloom. We shall have to wait and see. But yeah, there's good stuff going on quietly in the background, if you know what I mean. And that sort of stuff tends to get ignored too much. Tend to look at, oh, I got a problem with this one. Oh, this one's new growth's failed. Or these leaves seem to be turning yellow earlier than they did last year. You're always looking for problems. And sometimes it can sound like the place is full of problems. Well, it's not. And there are some. Don't get me wrong. Let's get this one down. This one just sits there quietly in the background. This is my Jenkinsii with a bloom from something else stuck to it. What on earth is that? Can't think what that's come off of. Not up there anyway. But I mean, this is producing a lot of new growths. I mean, this extension out to the right there is now right round here. And in underneath there are loads of roots. So that piece has extended dramatically. The piece at the top is now heading over the top. New growths coming out all over the place on this, and it's now growing right in underneath the mount, and it is heading up the back. I knew it would. Well, the thing is, it was probably hanging with its back to the light for a while, yeah, which has made these growths turn towards the light. So instead of pointing to us as we're looking at it now, they were heading this way. And of course, now that they've got there, they're going to turn upwards. So all these new growths are going to go up the back of the plant. So eventually, another year or two, this mount will probably be smothered. Now that bloomed like an absolute good one this year for the first time. So there's no reason why this shouldn't bloom again next year. And that was quite a show. I took that into Wessex and put it on the competition tables, and it got a first. Well, that was good, but it was the only entry. So it was the only one, so it could only come first. But the guys who did the judging that time, they said that probably would have come first wherever you put it. But strangely enough, that plant got me the most points in that section at the Orchid Society, and I got a trophy at the end of the year for the most points from one plant. Not from putting in quite a lot and getting a few points. That got so many points that, you know, it took a trophy. I said, you've got a strange way of working things out at Wessex, that a single plant over a year can actually get more points than some people that have put plants in perhaps at every meeting. So it was a good one. I mean, this is the one that has trouble hydrating. Hang on, I'm hooked up here somehow. That's got it. This one drinks a lot. This is the Findlayanum, and it always pushes out new roots quite happily, but they don't hydrate very well. So this one always gets some new moss as the roots start, and then they've got something to get into and stay hydrated. Come the winter time, I'll probably tease quite a bit of that moss off, because it'll need resting. And if you've got a huge mass of moss on the dendrobium roots and you try and rest it, how are you going to do it? Because if you put water on that moss in cooler temperatures, it's going to stay wet for days. So I'll probably tease that off later, but that's pushed on some nice new growths, new canes. I've had a lot of kikis off of this year, and there's two on there that need coming off now, in fact. Do it while you think of it, boy. You'll only forget. Been meaning to take these off for some time, providing they twist off relatively easy with one hand, which they should do. Now I think I might need two hands. I need one to hold the cane still and one to twist, so I'll leave it there. That'll remind me to do it. But yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. Something I am looking forward to is my Oncidium verrucosum has got a spike. And it's not a brilliant spike, but it's a spike. I don't know how many buds we got on there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7, something like that. That's next to a Sharry baby one, pushing on. That's branching quite nicely now. There's more to come there. But yeah, there's an awful lot of plants with no spikes and no buds. It's because it's the growing season. You know, they're pushing on, ready for a time later. You know, a lot of the Cattleyas are probably going to bloom as we get into late autumn or even into winter. And then a hell of a lot of the dendrobiums aren't going to bloom until late winter, early spring. They're growing. But the growing is good. It's not just about the blooms, you know, it is growing plants on to the point where they will bloom. You know, that's all good stuff. Anyway, so, you know, some brighter thoughts about things that are doing quite well. See, now this Vanda looks awful at the moment because it's got 2 lower leaves dying off. Well, I was just going to say, if they come off reasonably easy, that looks better, doesn't it? This is the same plant. But just taking off some old dead leaves, you know, makes a plant look better. I get a pile of them as I go along. Sometimes that sits there for a couple of days till I clear it out, but I keep it all tidy, it's all together. And if ever I see a leaf on the floor, the first thing I do is think, now where the hell have you come from? Have you come off something that's got a problem? So we look up. It's probably come off of here. There's another one. Yeah, that's come off of that one. Now these are the older canes, and these leaves were in quite a state when I got it. They're expected to fall. So that's not a problem, but it could have been. It's got to be worth a look. So any dead leaves on the floor, if you keep yourself tidy and pick them up, work out where they came from and have a quick look. Are the leaves starting to drop because there's a problem? Or are they naturally dropping because they're old or it's their time and it's a, you know, deciduous or semi-deciduous plant? So always worth a quick look when you find dead leaves. Right, I'll see you next time. I just thought I'd have a look at some things that are... I mean, this little twinkle up here, I mounted a twinkle. This is tiny twinkle, so it's a miniature twinkle. And so... the Oncidium twinkles are miniature plants anyway, and this is a miniature. And this has got stacks of new growths coming out. You know, I mean, that's going to have a lot of spikes on it later in the year. It potentially, each one of those new growths could have 2 spikes, but they'll all have at least one. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, one up the middle. There's at least 7 new growths on that plant. Yeah. So I mean, you know, progress, good stuff. Don't only look at the problems, have a look at the good stuff now and again. Some of the really small Cattleya types that came out of the big box, some of which I didn't think would even grow. Well, growing. You know, nice big strong new growth. Pushed out a reasonable root system now, so it's got some support behind it. So coming on. I mean, I don't know how big this is going to have to get before it blooms. Looking at it, it looks like a seedling. But some Cattleyas are miniatures. There's certainly some lovely miniature Laelias around, although they've probably been reclassified as Cattleyas now. But yeah, I mean, just, you know, some of the little seedling plants. There's another one up here. It's grown a lot of roots. It's got a nice new strong growth coming out the top. Another one sticking out the side there. So it's growing. You know, I mean, that could be years off reaching blooming size. But it's growing. It's doing okay. How much effort's involved in that? None. It's a mount. Yeah, it is mounted. A little bit of effort there. Once that's done, it sits there and does its thing. All I've got to do is make sure it's kept hydrated. You know, and gets a bit of food. So it just does its own thing. Effortless once they get going. And this is, mind you, this one's been blooming. This is its 3rd year now. This is Orangus, which one is this? This is going to be, I think this is Decariana. But, you know, I was pleased that both of these 2 plants are pushing out 2 spikes. Well, the top one's pushed out a 3rd one. So that's progress. That's only ever, the first year it bloomed, one of them had 1 spike and the other one had 2. Last year, both of them had 2. This year, one's got 2, one's got 3. It's progress. It's good stuff. And if you look closely on that spike on the left of the shot, you can see the buds starting to form now. See the bits of green? And the one next to it's got the bits of green just showing. So the buds are starting to form at long last, because Orangus spikes are notoriously slow. Yeah, don't hold your breath. That sort of plant, but it's growing. It's going to bloom. It's good stuff. And most of the resting dendrobiums are in growth mode. I mean, the only one that isn't really a true winter rester is Hercoglossum, and that's got some late blooms on it. So there are, I think that's that one and this Infundibulum cross and the Comet King. Oh, and that one's going to drop later today probably. So I've still got some dendrobiums in bloom. Star of the show is Hibiki this year. Might not be the star next year. Might not have a very good blooming next year, and something else will shine. But yeah, there's some good stuff going on, and the good stuff is often neglected because you keep worrying about your problems. You know, line your plants up, get 20 plants in a row and think, oh, I've got a problem with that one and I've got a problem with that one. Well, what about the other 18 that are doing well? Yeah? It's not all doom and gloom. And in the main, you'll probably find a lot of your orchids are doing okay. But you tend to concentrate and worry about those that aren't. Rightly so, don't get me wrong, but you know, a plant that's got a problem can be looked at, diagnosed and possibly dealt with and recover from the problem, whatever it was. But those that are doing okay still need looking after. You still got to keep your eye on things and spot problems as early as possible. Try and work out what the hell they are, which is not always easy, and try and deal with them best you can. And take away their problem, and then they're in amongst that big row of good stuff that's doing okay. And I'm sure most of you, if you start looking at your plants, I'm sure most of them are doing okay. But the problems worry us. But don't let them get you down. Just think of the good stuff now and again. My Tolumnias, unless they're in bloom, we never look at them. I mean, they just sit up here. I mean, this little miniature's been growing well this year. Good root system now. So I've got to try and look at the screen and not what I'm doing. This little one that was dying has pushed some new growths out and it's now got a little spike. This two-tone one, that's purple on the top, green on the bottom. That's grown some new growths and pushed out roots, right out, extended. This one doesn't look very good because the oldest part of the plant is tatty and the new growths are heading off away from the tatty bit. So the bit you tend to, this bit catches your eye. I couldn't mind to take that fan off actually because you've got new growths up here, extensive roots all over the place. This little one's been recovering for a while. It's now growing roots and new growths. This one's probably got the best root system of all. They're everywhere. That's my species, and it's doing okay. They're growing. You know, they got new growths pushing out and associated new roots. Good stuff. It's not all doom and gloom. This one, oh, it's getting dark in here now. Should be getting light. It's daytime already. This Wilbur Chan bulbophyllum is a beautiful plant. Look at these leaves. These are the new leaves. They're gorgeous. But it hasn't bloomed for me. Ever. And do I care? Yes and no. It's such a nice looking plant. I'd keep this if it never bloomed and just grow it on with these lovely big glossy leaves. So some things are there for the plant, not necessarily for the blooms. The blooms are a bonus, yeah. You listening? Come on. But then the parentage behind that might be one that's seasonal, might be an autumn bloomer, and all these new growths it's put on this year could be getting ready for some blooms. I don't know. You never know. Anyway, I'm not going over everything and be here all flipping day. But yeah, don't worry too much about the couple of problems you've got without remembering those that are not a problem, that are doing good. That's the cheery bit. That's the bit that probably makes it all worthwhile. Don't forget your problem ones, but don't harp on them. Don't let them get you down. You know, you're going to get a problem now and again. That's just life with orchids. It just happens. The less you get, chances are the better you'll getting. Yeah? Yeah. If you've got more problems than not, then you've got some work to do. Yeah? But it's a learning curve, and that learning never stops. Ever. Never stops. There's always another little snippet of information that you didn't know. Perhaps a little bit of information about a specific plant that you've got and not had long, and you suddenly get to chat to somebody who's had one 20 years and has found out about its little quirks, and they pass them on. Little snippets of information. It's all good stuff. And of course with the internet you can then pass it on to others. It's all good stuff. So it's not all doom and gloom. Look on the bright side. Look at the positives. And sometimes it's worth just making yourself do that. Make yourself look round at the positive side of it. Not concentrate on the worrying side of it. And life will produce a smile perhaps now and again. I'd probably have a bigger smile if it wasn't chucking it down with rain. But as I said, it saved me having to go out and water the garden, or parts of the garden. So I need to get on with watering in here. I had a lazy day yesterday. I got part way through watering the pots and got fed up. So I stopped, walked away from it. I thought if I continue I'm not going to enjoy it, which means I probably won't give the plants a good look over as I'm watering them, so I'm stopping. And now I'll carry on today from where I left off. Probably finish it off today. I may not finish off those pots because I didn't do the mounts yesterday. Well, they will need doing today, although I suspect some of them are still... Yeah, this is the one that I look at. This one dries slowest because it's got so much media behind it and a mass of moss. So that's the one that dries out last. But then those that are bare rooted, they're dry in a couple of hours. And that's missed a day completely now. No harm done. It's a dull day. No heat in here yesterday. It certainly doesn't look like we'll get much today either. What are we at? 21 at 85% humidity. That's still a growing environment. I'd prefer 25 with 85% humidity, but 21 will do. It's not cool enough to stop things growing, not yet. Enjoy your orchids, have fun. See you next time.